What famous person did you regret meeting because they were an ass? I met James Brown back in the 80s when I lived in Vale. The man was dissatisfied with everything and generally drunk. Absolute flip side was meeting Mr. Rogers when I was at Pitt. That man was the real deal. Jared Leto. I worshipped him as a teenager, mainly from seeing him in Requiem for a Dream and My So-Called Life and his band. But he was the most pretentious and arrogant person in real life. Never meet your heroes. He expected my seat on a plane. He was our local news anchor. Actually said, "I may look familiar." I said, "You're a merchant banker?" Jared Leto. Hit on my girlfriend at the time and called me fat. His brother Shannon was super nice though. I've met lots of celebrities due to my job and where I've worked. Most are just normal people. One that does stand out to me though is Barbara Streisand. She was staying in a hotel I used to work at and wanted a set of small steps leading up to her bed to be made so her dog could get up there. She also wanted a fresh roll of turf brought every day for her dog to piss it on. On the flip side though, Britney Spears is an utter sweetheart who comes across like she just wants peace and to be left alone. She used to like having flowers delivered to her room so she could make displays etc. They were pretty good. Cannot wait to see all of these answers cut and pasted on a BuzzFeed article. I wouldn't say disappointing as I never was eager to meet him, but Drake. Drake was just unprofessional and egotistical when I worked with him both times. This was before he got big. First award show type level. He's told me to duck off directly and I watched his mom calm him down from a tantrum. I once met Bill Burr at the Comedy Store in Hollywood. This was a little bit after his first Netflix special came out and I was a huge fan. Saw all the YouTube vids out at the time including his famous Philly rant. Needless to say I was starstruck when I saw him and couldn't really muster the courage to speak. He was talking to some people in the hallway and I didn't know how to ask for a picture without being rude. So I stood there with my girlfriend kinda looking his direction. Once he acknowledged us, my girlfriend asked him my boyfriend is a huge fan. "Hey, we take a photo?" At which point Bill said, "Duck, no, I don't do pictures." My heart sank. Then he smiled and said, "No, I'm just kidding. Come here. Where would I be without you guys?" Then he motioned us in for a group photo and said, "Now let's put our arms around each other like we know each other." He totally made my week. Dude is awesome. I used to work in a posh hotel in Canada, vague on purpose, and I had met many famous people during my time there. Most were forgettable interactions honestly, but one stands out as the absolute worst. Chevy Chase. He is a trash human being. He was totally miserable and insulting to all the staff. And we treated him with nothing but professional respect and courtesy. If I ever meet him again I'll tell him to his face what a colossal piece of it he is. I can't watch his movies since. For the record, the best celebrity guest for me was Dave Grohl. He's an awesome guy. I met a local weatherman from my neck of the woods. Twice. People love this dude on social media, but the both times I've seen him, he was a total asshole. On the flip side, I met Emilio Estevez at work. He was cool. I was the ass. I saw Don Cheadle at an airport and was thinking about Ocean's 11 and said to my friend, "Dude, it's Bernie Mac," and he looked back and said, "No, I'm the other black guy from Ocean's 11, but at least you liked the movie." A famous soap opera star in my country. He came into the Dairy Queen I was working at. I didn't know who he was and my co-worker started hyperventilating and went to the back. The guy was rude, and when I handed him his cone he said, "Is that all?" Like he expected extra because he was famous. Yeah dude. If you order one scoop you get one scoop. Didn't find out he was famous until he left and my co-worker came back to the front. Reggie Jackson. He was a childhood idol of mine. I got the opportunity to get a photo with him at some booth at a trade show called Internet World years ago during the .com boom. No one was in line to get pictures with him, so I walked up to get a photo while he was apparently trying to get the girls in the next booth over to sleep with him. He acted all but that I asked for a photo, even though that is what he was hired for, and rolled his eyes. I guess he thought I cock-blocked him by just showing up in line to get a picture. I tossed the picture in the trash once I got it. Later that day I got a ball signed by Steve Garvey, who was super nice. He replaced Reggie Jackson as my hero that night. Me and my sister saw Alec Baldwin, Tina Fey, and Salma Hayek on the street when we were eating lunch. They were just coming out of a car, about to go into some building next to us. We had no idea why they were together, but in retrospect it was definitely because they were filming 30 Rock together. My sister said, "Oh my god, is that Tina Fey?" And Alec Baldwin turned around and went right in her face and said, "Don't ducking say that. Don't speak to us. Why would you say something like that? You can't speak to us. Not now." But it didn't really end there. He yelled again at us outside his building, saying, "Don't look over here. Turn around and eat your food. Duck off." He sounded genuinely furious at us, almost like he wanted us to yell back and start something with him. Honestly, my sister was on the verge of tears. It was horribly embarrassing. Everybody knows now that Alec Baldwin has a history of screaming at people, but at the time we had no idea. Don't get me wrong, my sister shouldn't have yelled at Tina Fey like that, but the way Alec snapped was straight up scary, like he was about to physically hurt her. Salma Hayek and some other lady who I didn't recognize came over and apologized to us. She asked if we wanted her to go and get Tina and get her autograph because apparently Tina felt bad too, but we said no. She then talked to us about the food we were eating, which was Mexican food, and we ended up having a brief conversation about NY's lack of quality Mexican food. She was incredibly charismatic and sweet. Probably only for British people, but my boyfriend saw Peter Kay with his bodyguard in a chippy. Didn't say anything but elbowed his brother. Peter Kay saw him and said, "Yeah, it is me. Now duck off." Pretty harsh considering my boyfriend was only 11 at the time. I'm gonna copy paste one of my previous comments because it sort of fits. I once made a drink for Britney Spears at Starbucks 6 or 7 years ago, and the experience left us all thinking she was an entitled diva. But with the info that's come out in the last couple years, I realize we had it all wrong. I was on bar that day and I remember glancing into the lobby and thinking, "Ha, that chick looks like Britney Spears, only older and skinnier." She was gorgeous but looked drawn and thin. I thought maybe hungover or partied way too hard. Wearing this denim miniskirt, platform heels, a fringe halter top, and smeared dark eyeliner. I reached for my next cup and in Sharpie it said Brit Dave, and I was like, So anyway, I make the drink. Britney is standing with her arms crossed tightly over her chest, looking at the floor, very standoffish. I call out the drink for Dave. She stares at it, reaches for it, then draws her hand back to her arms crossed position. Some dude picks it up and hands it to her, and they leave. I catch my co-worker on register and say, "Was that?" And she automatically begins recounting her experience, which was that when she said, "Hi, what can I get for you?" The bodyguard said, "Brit, what are you having?" Though she was right in front of my co-worker, she gave her order to her bodyguards. Apparently there were two, and although my co-worker could hear it perfectly, the bodyguard repeated it. When co-worker went to write her name on the cup, which was standard and enforced at all times at my store, bodyguard held up his hand and said, "Excuse me, do not write her name on the cup. It's Dave. My name's Dave." So that explains the crossed out name. My co-worker was irritated because it was like she was invisible. Had addressed Britney directly because she was at the counter. Had clearly heard the order. Had written down the exact name the dude addressed her by. But it was like, she felt she wasn't good enough to have direct contact with her, so she had to have some sort of middleman when they were 2 feet apart. Now that I've heard about how little advocacy Britney has over her entire life, I'm completely second guessing my initial reaction to the experience. It seems entirely plausible now that she wasn't permitted to interact with anybody during that outing. Extremely sad. When I was 6 or 7, Hulk Hogan pretend WrestleMania chased me out of a boardroom I wasn't supposed to be playing around in at Little League Complex, Cross Bayou in Pinellas County. Anyways, the story is my dad was coaching a game for my brother's team. I went to go sneak around in an empty room. Hulk's son played baseball there too and he must have seen me sneak in the room. I was hiding under the front desk when he came in with his Hulk voice. "Who's sneaking around in here?" and 7-year-old me nearly had a heart attack. He chased me out of the room while I snuck out acting like he couldn't see me. Looking back at it, you can tell he was just having fun with a kid and his famous persona, but at the time I was absolutely traumatized and nobody believed my story. Prince Andrew. Spent a lot of time around him about 10 years ago, as working at private social events he attended. The guy is a total prick. Met Kevin Costner and Clint Eastwood when they were filming near Austin. I was waiting tables. Costner was a jerk. Eastwood was amazing. And a caricature of himself. He's huge. Huge hands. The lines in his face are deeper than you think they are. But he was so polite and gentlemanly and gracious. Edit. Yes, on a perfect world, it was actually a golf club where I was head waiter. Them being there caused quite a ruckus. I went so far as to stash them in a private dining room so they could eat in peace. Clint was very apologetic about the whole thing, profusely thanking me, etc. Kevin never even looked me in the eye, just said, "I'll have the whatever it was he asked for," and that was it. Edit 2. Copied from my reply to another reply. That's partly it, but he did do some stuff that waiters hate, like shaking his glass for a refill, with attitude. Stuff like that, especially in a situation where I gave them their own space and no competition for my service. I said this in another comment, everyone is allowed itty days, but the question posed was who did I regret meeting because they were an ass. So this was my answer. Edit 3. My first awards. Thank you. Every time this thread comes up, James Corden ends up taking it over. Hey James, you won't remember me, but me and my friends sat at a table next to you and Harry Styles plus some others in Manchurian Legends in London's Chinatown about 6 years ago. We didn't bother you, but you were a massively entitled cunt who yelled and treated the waitstaff like it, and when one of my party politely suggested you calm down, you got really aggressive and threatening, in a chubby way, like a boozy panda. So my question is this, why did Harry seem so cool while you were such a massive throbbing bell? And this is from his AMA thread. Literally hundreds of posts like this from X, fans, staff and other actors. I met Shane Dawson at a restaurant I used to work at. He used to come in a few times a year with his fiancée and in-laws. He's a deal. None of my servers liked him or wanted to serve his family, and I damn near had to fight some little girls off the property because they would not leave without seeing him. My dad has been a radio personality for over 30 years and worked in country music for over half of it. He gets to meet celebrities semi-regularly. Apparently Keith Urban was really nice. Carrie Underwood was kind of mediocre BC. He caught her right after her performance and she was tired. But Kenny Chesney puts the D&D bag. Direct quote from my dad. Kenny promised to sign some pictures, shirts, etc. for a couple of kids who won a game through the radio. Kenny instead took a bunch of groupies into one of the back rooms of the radio station with a bottle of whiskey and locked the door. When my dad tried to get him to open the door and fulfill his end of the deal, he called the cops on my dad, and he was lucky enough to get a cop who was a good acquaintance. Cop said there wasn't much he could do other than make Kenny leave, so that's what he did. Kids never got their stuff signed, so my dad gave them some coupons for free pizza. He said that after a few years other radio hosts told him they had similar encounters. Bobby Flay. We paid hundreds of dollars to go to a fancy event he was participating in. Waited for a long ass time to just meet him and say hi. He looked at us and walked away. Was a D about it too. I met Will Ferrell at a movie premiere for a holiday movie. After the movie premiere there was a meet and greet, and the actors were lingering on the main floor. I introduced myself just to tell him what's up and that I enjoyed the movie. He looked at me with a side glance and stated, "Get away from me." I was 12 years old at the time. Not my story but a co-worker's story. Let's call her Holly. Holly was a flight attendant many years ago, and on one flight Whitney Houston and Bobby Brown were in first class. Holly was going through taking drink orders and politely asked Whitney Houston if she would like something to drink but didn't get an answer. So assuming she didn't hear her, Holly asked her again if she would like something to drink. Whitney Houston looked out the window with a disgusted face in response. Bobby Brown then said to Holly, she doesn't speak to the help. Then ordered for her. If you're flying commercial, you are not hot it. I cannot fathom the level of arrogance it takes to think people are so far below you that they are not deserving of being spoken to by you. Edit. I was not moved by Whitney Houston's death, but she did not deserve to die over this. It y'all. Ace Frehley of Kiss. It was at a rock and roll TV movie memorabilia convention in the mid-90s. shortly before the Kiss reunion. And he clearly didn't wanna be there. He didn't talk to fans. Didn't say hi. Hell, he didn't even look at you when you came to his table. He just signed whatever you placed in front of him and then you were hustled away. On the other hand, Adam Batman West was at the next signing table and he was a totally cool guy. Shook hands, chatted with everyone, signed whatever we wanted, posed for pics, etc. Meeting him more than made up for Ace's surly, hungover douchebaggery. I met Russell Crowe one night at a bar, by accident. It was an oldie, smoky dive bar. I just happened to sit down right next to him. I didn't recognize him at first but I asked if I could bum a cigarette from him and he gave me one. That's when I knew who he was. He wasn't an asshole. He was actually pretty nice. But I could absolutely tell he wanted to be left alone. I smoked the cigarette and left him alone. Edit. I met 50 Cent at a signing for the vodka he was promoting. He was super nice. He didn't say much. I brought a couple of books I have that he wrote. He took the time to open each one to the title page and sign them. Probably my favorite celebrity experience. David Cross is pretty miserable. He's from Atlanta and his sister runs a food truck in town. Her recipes were all named after David Cross Arrested Development type stuff. So my wife and I, being fans of David, asked about it and she told us she was his sister. So for months we chat her up anytime we order food from her truck. And eventually David's in town. She invites us to come to the food truck park to meet him. So we bring a poster from the early 2000s and are super pumped to meet him. We get there and she's very anxious and hesitant to introduce us. Weird, but okay. Oh no. It's okay, I'll introduce you. She does and he was incredibly dismissive and unpleasant. Never heard of anyone having a good interaction with him. Best interaction was with Conan O'Brien. He's a total class act. Chatted him up in a bathroom line of all places and said my wife and I were huge fans. He said we should come by the table to chat. I told him we didn't want to interrupt his dinner but he insisted. Then asked if we wanted pictures. And was super cool. Diana Ross. I worked in a health club in a hotel across the street from a stadium when I was young. She came in, looked at the pool, which was a really decent lap pool, and said, "My bathtub is bigger than this." I replied, "Go back to your bathtub then." She wanted me fired instantly. HR told me to go home for 2 days because if they fired everyone she wanted fired, the hotel wouldn't have any staff. Scott Disick and Kourtney Kardashian. We met them in Cancun. They were snobby and stuck up. This was right after Mason was born. I had no interaction with Mason and the nanny did everything. They were super offended that not everyone at the airport knew who they were. Edit. I am not sure why people asking me if this surprises me. The question did not ask if it was surprising and no it wasn't. When my best friend was 17, she got snuck into the grand opening of the Playboy Club at the Palms. She got hit on by both a drunken Owen Wilson and a drunken James Franco that night. The difference was that when she clarified her age, Owen was like, "Oh, it never mind," and left her alone, and James was like, and tried to give her his hotel room key. I do not. My mom met Bill Cosby once. She said that he kept hitting on her friend. Deion Sanders. I interviewed him at an NFL military event like 8-9 years ago and he was a prick the whole time. He threw my love mic on the ground when he was done instead of placing it in my outstretched hand. I was also active duty military at the time and the event was on a ship. Hey Sanders, if you read it and see this, duck you dude. Duck you. I'd rather go positive, so this is the opposite type of story. My neighbor was a prominent music promoter. My mother always warned us to not bother him as he wasn't overly kid friendly, but his wife was very nice and on rare occasions we would get some backstage passes to a really cool concert. I was 17 and scored one of those backstage passes to an all-day stadium concert that included Genesis, Blondie, Elvis Costello, Robert Hazard and Flock of Seagulls. Remember them? Genesis, Elvis Costello, Blondie, Robert Hazard, a Flock of Seagulls. Prior to going I was warned to not get in the way, so I didn't. It was held in a giant open-air old football stadium that could hold close to 100k people. They had marked off the back 1/8 of the bleachers as part of the backstage, so I just sat up in those empty bleachers by myself and watched all the bands play from behind. It was tons of fun and I made sure to stay out of anyone's way. While Elvis Costello was playing, this short balding British guy notices me and comes over to say sahi. He introduces himself as Phil and started asking why I was sitting up in the stands by myself, so I explained my guest status and that I didn't want to be in anyone's way. He then has me come with him down to where all the food is and insists I eat as much as I want. When I protested cause I didn't want to get in trouble with my neighbor, he told me it was alright. I could be his guest. Well, I was starving and thirsty, so I loaded up a plate, grabbed a bunch of soda, sat and talked with him for a bit and then retreated back to my sanctuary so I wouldn't bother him anymore. 10 minutes later the guy comes back and he's with his buddy. They sit down, pull out some cold beer and are just chilling out watching the show and making polite conversation with a shy 17-year-old. 5 minutes later another guy comes up, sits with us, pulls out beer and serves all of us, and he also just starts kicking back with the most hilarious sense of humor. All three were unbelievable polite, considerate and funny. They treated me like they had been my buddies for years and we were just hanging out together. It was a great time. The trio was Phil Collins, Chester Thompson and Tony Banks from Genesis. When I was working at Best Buy back in 2003-09, Robin Williams came into our store and purchased every single copy of MRS Doubtfire. He then whipped out a Sharpie and signed all 50+ copies for the employees at the store. He then stuck around telling jokes and just hanging out with the staff. I just wanted to share. He was def the best actor interaction I've had personally. So nice. Rest in peace. Met Morgan Freeman at a Bed Bath & Beyond. He was shopping for a teapot on a lower shelf and stood up right when I almost walked into him. And I was like, wow, you look just like Morgan Freeman. And he, without skipping a beat, was like, if I was Morgan Freeman, wouldn't I be in Hollywood or something? And the voice made me now like 99.9% certain it's him. And I was like, I guess you would. Enjoy your time here. I don't regret meeting him and don't think he was an ass. Just thought it was so Morgan Freeman of him to have a line like that to make you wonder if you met Morgan Freeman or just a guy that likes to act like a character in a bunch of his movies. Jared Leto. I sat next to him on a flight from Monterrey, Mexico back in 2018. Absolute asshole. Justin Timberlake. This was when I was working a drive-thru at a Burger King, around 2002 to 2003 or so. He came up at the drive-thru with someone else driving, but he was sticking his head out like hey at us. I didn't really recognize him, but he asked if we knew who he was, and I said no, but my co-worker said yes. Then he looked at me like you don't know, and was just really confused. My co-worker said it was Justin Timberlake, and he said yeah, hello, come on man. He then sort of just had small talk. He asked us how work was, how our day was. But here's the thing. The entire time, he is leaning all the way over on the driver, who is clearly horribly uncomfortable and a bit crushed by him leaning over on him. He asked me if I was from the Middle East, and I said no, and he clearly didn't listen and then said yeah, that sucks. Sorry for the whole Afghanistan thing. He then asked us if we wanted his autograph, and we said sure, and he wrote it down and gave it to us. He then said bye and left. It was all in all a really funny experience, and I try not to let it influence my view of him because he was clearly on something. But he just came off a bit like a big goofy attention-loving ass the entire time. Yeah, you'll hear the James Corden one every time this is posted on Reddit. That am I has to come up. This reminds me of when I met Danny DeVito. Oh, don't worry, Danny DeVito is not himself an ass, but oh boy does he have an ass. James Franco. Though I technically didn't meet him but sat in on a panel he did at a film festival. I was an HS and was at the festival with 3 friends. When we got word he was doing a candor about one of his movies that had just come out, and we got really excited. We waited over an hour to get in to see the panel. We were let into the room where we waited another 45 minutes for him to show up. When he did show up, boy looked rough. It was almost 4 PM and he looked beyond hungover. His clothes were dirty, he OBV hadn't showered, and he spent more time talking to the floor than anything else. But the cherry on top, his ego could have filled the room. Every question that was asked he made into a story about how great he was, both actor, director, and producer. I do think some of his stuff is funny, but he's a B actor at best. I remember clear as day some woman asked him to describe a role that was challenging for him and how he overcame it. He just laughed at her. The candor ended up being so boring I fell asleep in my chair. 0/10. I have the perfect combination of bad star good star. It was at DragonCon. Maybe 2005? I'm going through the big autograph room, waiting to get David Carradine's autograph. He looked so mad. He didn't say a word as I told him how much I enjoyed his work. Okay, I get it. Maybe he was having a bad day. Next to MR. Carradine was Mark Singer, star of Beastmaster. Capital V, etc. MR. Singer is smiling, talking to people as they go by. He looks genuinely happy to be there. Suddenly, a woman behind me stumbled and dropped a huge stack of materials she wanted autographed. MR. Carradine looked down on her like she was a bug. Mark Singer jumped over his table and started helping the woman pick up her things. Didn't hesitate one moment. Just started helping. That's when I decided that if I ever became famous, I was going to try to be like Mark Singer, not David Carradine.